a pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a straight dog is nice. She's a pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.
Welcome, Transformation Talk Network listeners. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the pushy broad from the Bronx. Welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged, where we share advice and support from experts in addiction and recovery. This is a show about something that is very important. And I did this show once before, but so many people have asked me to bring it back, so I'm going to bring it back with a brand new, exciting guest. We're going to talk about what I consider the great addiction surprise party, interventions. Let me tell you about the person that we're going to talk with today. I am pleased to announce my guest, Michael O'Leary. You know Michael O'Leary because he's an American actor and a writer. He's known for playing Rick Bauer in the soap opera Guiding Light, which he was nominated for a Daytime Emmy back in 1985. He's been on popular shows like New Amsterdam, Venice, a web series, FBI, Law and Order, and in 2022, Halloween Ends. He's currently in The Boy in the Cabinet Beneath the Sink, a movie short that he did back in June of 2024. But most importantly, he has shared openly with us that he has been in recovery and he is also giving back. And he is a licensed interventionist. So we want to talk about that. And we want to talk about why intervention is so important. So the Pushy Broad from the Bronx welcomes my guest, Michael O'Leary. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Hey, Ellen. Good to see you again.
So this is a very important topic for all of us. I get so many questions on what is an intervention and why should we do it. So tell us what your definition of an intervention actually is.
Well, sure. I'm going to lean into what is the typical intervention that most people are familiar with. They see it on TV shows, and it's called the Johnson model. And the Johnson model, typically, the person who is being confronted does not know that this is going to happen. He or she is confronted at a home, a neutral location with family members who are there. They typically are instructed by the interventionist to have a letter written and to express, their concerns for the person of concern. That's the Johnson model. The Arise intervention model is the one that I've been certified, which is probably maybe 5 or 6% of the interventions done in this country. It's very small, which is to say this is a family disease. Therefore, the family is involved from the very beginning. There is no ambush for the person of concern. They're aware that the family's going to get together. They're aware that it's called invitational. So people are invited to become family members, friends. It could be a doctor. Anybody who loves and cares about that person concerned are invited to come.
I see.
It sounds counterintuitive. What addict is going to voluntarily be a part of a family meeting? But 83% within 2 weeks do come to these family meetings. So there are clinical and research to show that one family member equals 5 clinicians. Let me repeat that. One family member that's a part of this process of recovery equals 5 clinicians. That's how powerful the family is in the process of recovery.
All right. So you said a lot there. You said a mouthful. Let me break it down for our listeners. First of all, an intervention specifically is when a group of people get together to persuade one individual to seek professional help. That's the basis of an intervention, right?
Yep.
everybody's gathering around to saying you need help and you're not getting it on your own and you're not listening to anybody about it, but the whole family knows that you need help for whatever reason. Okay. Usually it's because you're drinking too much or you're drugging too much and the family knows, right? Just like we said before, and I've said before, there are no secrets. The whole family knows what's going on.
Exactly.
Now, in the Arise model, which is a certain kind of intervention which you are certified in, you are saying that basically we send out invitations to everybody around, including the surprise person, including the person that actually needs help. Okay? So how does that actually begin? Do you get a phone call from a family member? Let's go back to basics.
Sure,
what
let's
happens?
go back to basics. So I get a phone call from a concerned person. Could be a parent, it could be a spouse, a friend, doesn't matter. They call me and they say, "Hey, Mike, I'm concerned about John." And I go through an hour of questions about John, his family. I build a genealogy. I get all this information about John. And at the end of that, we prepare what is called a family meeting. And so it could be anybody who is a family member, and it could be concerned others. It could be friends. In fact, from my experience, I've often found that a friend can be more impactful than a family member, which is interesting. So we call John. We say, "John, we're meeting we're getting together." Often these meetings are happening on Zoom because people are in geographic locations that are not conducive to all getting together. Say, "John, we're getting together on Tuesday, the family to discuss, your drinking problem. And everybody would like you to attend." And he or she may say, "No, thank you. I'm not going to be part of that. But we're going to get together anyway." And so
is that what happens if you turn around and you say, "Ellen, the whole family is going to get together to discuss your drinking problem," and I turn around and say, "Thank you very much, Michael, but I don't want to get together," then the next words out of your mouth are, "Well, we're going to get together anyway"?
Yes, we're going to get together anyway. So just to be clear, I'm not I'm a facilitator. Okay, I'm not a licensed psychologist. Or, I'm a facilitator. So I go by a protocol that the Arise model has, but I also draw on my 12 years of recovery and sobriety. And I use these two things to walk through these questions and their rules of engagement to make sure that these discussions are civil and they're constructive. And oftentimes that person doesn't show up for the first time.
Okay. All right. So first of all, that's very important to know. All right. You are certified in the Arise method, which means you know exactly what's going on and you know how to lead the conversation and move it into productivity so that people are not shouting and screaming at each other or accusatory, but they're simply voicing their concerns based on the commonality that everybody knows that help is needed here for this particular person. Okay. So you tell me that we have this meeting and you tell me there are rules. Give me an idea of exactly what happens, right? How does it start? What happens? People want to know the nitty gritty. Does one person talk? How do you facilitate this?
So you start, I would start the meeting and I said, we're gathering here today to discuss John's drinking. And I would lay out the protocol of engagement. And this is a very important thing here, Ellen, is that with the Arise model and the Johnson model, John is in the middle of the circle. And I saw you pointing your fingers. There's a lot of that. It's you, it's you, it's you. No. We take him and we make him part of the circle rather than putting him inside the circle. So what does that do? That removes the shame, blame, and guilt that's intrinsic with an intervention. Does it remove all of it? No, but it helps to facilitate constructive conversation. So you did this and you did that. No, 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 we can't do that. We have to say, I feel when this happens, I feel this, or I'm concerned. We change the verbiage of communication so we can make it constructive.
I see. Okay. So how long do interventions usually last?
Well, typically, it depends on the situation, on the severity of the situation with the person who is inflicted. You could be like the family could collectively decide, hey, we need to get him into inpatient right away, or you could find an outpatient. That's it could be. My job is usually done after 6 months, 6 to 8 months, and we have family meetings. We meet once a week. We have topics of conversation. Everybody has homework. I give everybody, and this is what happens is as you facilitate these meetings, you find out other people are dealing with their own stuff. Like, for example, I had a woman who was there for her aunt who was dealing with, her own issues of, sex addiction. And then her husband was a gambling addict. And so all of these things are unpacked during the meeting. And so it's not just, it's interesting because everybody is living in some sort of trauma and they're there for John, but then they realize they have their own stuff that they have to deal with. And I've dealt with a family that didn't talk to each other for 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. And somebody facilitated this meeting and now they speak to each other on a weekly basis via Zoom. They had no
That's fantastic.
They had no relationship whatsoever. That's the power of family.
Well, not only that, but it's also the power of intervention. When you have a mediator, when you bring people together for a common purpose, then all of a sudden they rediscover everything else that's come along. So I think that's a really good thing. So let's just back it up for a moment.
Sure.
What would bring somebody to call you for an intervention? What should people out there be aware of and be looking for as criterion for calling you and saying, I think we need an intervention here? What should we be looking for?
So there are times where I'm not the right person. There may be times where the person who is calling me may want a female specifically to deal with another young woman, or it could be age specific. It could be somebody who's, say, 25 years old, who has been sober for 7 or 8, 9 years, has been certified just like me, who maybe can identify with a young person more than I can. So we can't ignore that sort of construct.
Okay.
And so typically I will get calls for people who are on the other side of, say, 40 or 45 or 50, something like that. And so when people look you up, or when they're trying to get information, they'll make those decisions on that. So, I mean, I'm in the entertainment industry, so I get a lot of people calling me who are, in the entertainment industry.
Okay, I understand. And there is a way to reach you, right? Michael P. O'Leary 27 at gmail.com.
Correct.
But you're not restricted to entertainers, and people in the media.
But
you are a working interventionist, which means people can reach out to you by email if they want to work with you, if they think that there is a loved one in isolation that's withdrawing, they think that a loved one has a drinking or an addiction problem, if they're not sure, but they know that their friend or their loved one is struggling. All of those things preclude sending an email to you and saying, can you help me or can you direct me someplace, correct?
yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's a really good thing. So what problems have you had in interventions? What can go wrong?
Well, you could have people who are active addicts who are in the meeting, and it's not about them, but there were people that were like actively smoking pot or abusing pot, or, everybody, as I said before, everybody has an ism. And so you don't necessarily have to be sober to join the meeting. In other words, if we're there for John and John's an alcoholic, but his brother Tom's an alcoholic, he's joining the meeting. He's not precluded for not joining the meeting. He can join the meeting. So there are no rules of excluding people with their own issues. And often that's it. Every time I do this, there's somebody who's struggling with something who joins the meeting to be there for John, but then we realize they have their own addiction to something.
I see. All right. So you're with somebody. So initially you develop a rapport with the person that is calling you. There's usually a family member that you coordinate with most of the time. I'm sure one or two family members that are in charge of pulling people together and pulling friends together. What is the purpose? Where should we be at the end here? What's the goal, the absolute goal in an intervention? Where do you want them to go?
So the goal is we're there primarily to help. I'm going to use John. We're there to help John find recovery. And so it could be inpatient, it could be outpatient, it could be just simply going to 12-step meetings. Depending, usually when people call me, Ellen, maybe when people call you, they're in crisis. So we're talking about the cusp of something about to happen. So there's 3 steps in my process. There's the phone call, there's the family meeting, and then the third step is the actual intervention, which is the family collectively says, you need to go to a facility. We have this facility planned for you to go. And then, of course, the consequences of that person not going. And that's...
All right. So here's 2 very, very big things, right, in this situation. First of all, you know that I've been in this industry for 20 years and am very familiar with interventions. I don't personally do them, but I do rely on people like you that are certified to do them as well. But there is a purpose to this. It's not just for the family to turn around and say, John, you have a problem, right? Or Susan, you have a problem. It is more than that, because just stating a problem is not coming to any conclusion, which also means that they have to work. Do they work with you to recommend a place for them to go, that person to go, so they have options for inpatient and outpatient treatment? How do they find those options? Yeah,
there's, if they live in Connecticut, there's options. I'm just using these as examples, things that would facilitate a solution that's not going to be punitive. All these things, as you and I both know, they cost money, and there's insurance involved and all these other things. A lot of these things have to be decided relatively quickly. So I'll come up with a suggestion, and then you do the coordination with that. And then I would also be involved in the transportation too. So I'm there from the very beginning to the end of this process. And
I understand.
Last part, here's the other thing. I just want to keep reiterating: this is a family disease. Everybody is sick. And when I was in Al-Anon, I went to an Al-Anon meeting, and I heard a woman said, when he left the house, we could all breathe again. So just because they're off to rehab, and he said, we're done with it. And earlier on, Ellen, I want you to remember, you're pointing the finger, and you did this, and you did that. That's exactly how that person feels, it's a blame, shame, and guilt. We want to remove that and have the family communicate with each other. And there's so much power in that process of family healing. I dealt with a family who didn't talk to each other for 10 years, and now they're talking again. They're learning to communicate with each other. So it's not just about the addict, and that's the important part, but it's about the whole family healing. And that's why we have Al-Anon, is because this is a family disease. And I think a lot of what the current model is, it's neglecting that. I wish I was a part of the Arise model, because my family was not involved in this holistic process of family healing. And so, I'm a very passionate advocate of the family being involved. This process just makes sense to me.
Well, not only is it a family disease, but every single treatment center that I've worked with in the last 10, 20 years has acknowledged the family disease. So if I send someone to residential or to outpatient treatment, the family must participate in a family program. All of the people that I see, I work with their families as well. And sometimes I work with families, and then other people sees the people that are, the addicts or alcoholics. It's amazing to me, the parents that I work with that turn around and say to me, can you fix my son? Or I don't know how to fix my son. And I will sit down and have conversations with them over and over again and have them realize there's no such thing as fixing anything. It is a question of understanding how to communicate and where each person is responsible and accountable for that portion of the disease. Because enabling and codependency is one of the greatest addiction disease ever.
Right.
And I see that on
enable.
so many different levels.
Everybody is an enabler in the family in one way or another. Everybody is enabling.
Yes.
And so the opposite of love is enabling.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So let me ask you. People say, I could do this myself. I don't need to have an outside person. If it comes to where they need something like this, give us your reasons for not going and just doing it yourself. Why an interventionist? Why is that important?
I think is that by the time you're thinking about this, when you're actually saying, I need help, then you need help. And you can't deny the obvious, which is, there's a saying, how's that working for you? How is your way working for you? And if you could be honest with yourself and say, this is not working, and all I'm doing is prolonging this problem, and I'm part of the problem, then you need help. This is a disease of isolation, not just for the addict, but for the person of concern and the family members. You feel powerless. Why can't I change him? Why is he doing this over and over again? And so you're in this place of absolute confusion, and you're befuddled, and you don't know what to do. If you're feeling that way, you need to make a phone call. And if you're not an expert in this field, you can be a PhD in whatever and not have any clue whatsoever of how to deal with addiction. It's sort of like somebody used to say, stay in your lane, Michael, stay in your lane. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about bipolar disease or anything else like that. If I have to include somebody in that, I do that. I just stay in my lane. It's okay to say, I don't know.
It is, but it's also okay to know that you've gone through training, you're certified, addiction, and you have good success rates, right, Michael?
Well, yeah, I do. I stay in touch with, even after, I stop working with people, I stay in touch with people, and of the 12 people that I've lately, there's only one person still an active addict. And so, but just remember, the first step of the 12 steps is this, Ellen, is that I'm powerless over alcohol. My life's unmanageable. I have a lot of people who say my life's unmanageable, but they can't admit that they're powerless over anything, and that's therein is the invitation to your own ego and your persona. And that's where people get in trouble. They can't do it. And so, if you don't get this first step of the 12 steps, then you're gonna live in your own misery. It's okay to say that you're powerless. It's okay to do that.
It's also okay for the person who needs to call about the loved one to say, I cannot do this on my own. Correct. I've tried everything I can to get someone to treatment, like you said, and I can't do this on my own. Michael, we have about a minute left. So I'd like you to do us a favor and tell us where to find you if somebody wants an intervention, and then talk a little bit about why you think interventions are important, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, sure. Intervention is important because you're breaking the chain of generational trauma. And so we all come from generational trauma, and alcoholism and addiction is generational trauma. It's passed on. And unless you deal with it today, you're going to pass it on to your children and their children's children, and it will never stop.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We can find Michael O'Leary at michaelpoleary@gmail.com. If you want to ask him some questions about intervention and start the process, please do that. Start off 2025 in the right way. Michael, thank you so much for being here and sharing, as always, your experience, your strength, your hope, and your dedication. This is Ellen, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, saying thanks for listening, and remember, everybody needs a little push.
From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.